She said it looking into your eyes like someone revealing a secret kept under lock and key. You are everything I've ever wanted. And you believed it. Why wouldn't you? When someone makes us feel unique, the brain goes into a dopamine-fueled euphoria of illusion. But as Schopenhauer warned, love is nothing more than a ruse of nature to ensure the continuation of the species. And there you were, caught in her first ruse, a charming compliment, delivered with almost surgical precision, at the right moment with the perfect tone. But it wasn't love. It was calculation. And you weren't the chosen one. You were just Plan B, well-positioned in case Plan A didn't work out. She treated you with a precise measure of attention and neglect. She disappeared without a trace, then reappeared with the ease of someone who never left. And instead of questioning it, you romanticized the vanishing. You gave poetic names to her indifference, feminine mystery, emotional intensity, delicate phase. But Schopenhauer would say it wasn't confusion, it was coldness. Her reason was intact, and it guided every return like an emotional trap. And you bit, because you wanted to believe she just needed time. When in reality, she only needed to keep you there, in a state of waiting, while she nurtured other, more stimulating connections. Remember when she called you understanding? At the time, it sounded like a virtue. You felt mature, almost enlightened, as if silent pain made you a higher being. But it was poison wrapped in a colorful ribbon, a compliment with a hidden message. Keep accepting crumbs. And you did. You thought you were being patient, when in fact you were being conditioned. Every time she said she wasn't ready, you thought it was just a matter of time. But Schopenhauer, with his dark clarity, would remind you, she was ready, just not for you. She was ready for someone else, the true center of her desire. You were emotional support, a shield, a safe anchor for the days she faced rejection. While you were making plans, she was running tests. While you dreamed of a we, she merely left the window slightly open, waiting to see if something more interesting would come along. And when she vanished for good, you stayed behind, trying to make sense of it all. But the truth is bitter, as Schopenhauer well knew. Illusion is natural, but disappointment is inevitable. She didn't owe you answers. From the beginning, she already knew the role you'd play in her story, the disposable piece in a carefully scripted emotional game. And this is where consciousness awakens. It wasn't love. It was a scripted performance. And you followed each act thinking you were the lead, when in truth you were just the luxury extra. If this video hit you like a punch, it's because you saw yourself in the mirror of truth. Share it. Comment. Spread this clarity. There are many still dreaming inside this illusion. Do you remember how she used to make you wait? Hours, sometimes days, without a response. And when she finally showed up, she'd drop a casual, "Hey stranger," as if it were spontaneous charm. You laughed, gave in, accepted. Deep down, something whispered that something was off, but you silenced that voice. You preferred to believe she was just different, busy, complex. You wanted to turn silence into poetry, indifference into emotional depth. You called it mystery, but Schopenhauer would call it blind will. That irrational impulse that drives us to keep trying despite the pain, fooled by a promise that will never be fulfilled. Each one of her disappearances was a move. She knew that distance would make you chase, and it worked. You increased your effort, wrote longer messages, tried to understand her like someone decoding an enigmatic work of art, when in reality, she was simply keeping you orbiting, lukewarm, controlled, warm enough to wait, but never warm enough to feel safe. That calculated distance was the trick, and you, thirsty for meaning, mistook absence for depth. You ignored all the signs, the instability, the lack of commitment, the absence of reciprocity. You were addicted to the possibility, to the maybe, the what if, the just a little longer and she'll change. But Schopenhauer had already warned us. Hope is the greatest of human illusions. She wasn't going to change, because she already had control of the narrative. She wrote the cycle, left you in emptiness, disappeared, then returned with the bare minimum. And you accepted that minimum as if it were love. With every return, you reignited the fantasy, and she restarted the game. Deep down, you knew. This wasn't normal. But you preferred the fairy tale to the naked truth, because facing reality meant admitting the unbearable. She was never yours. She only showed up when she was bored, lonely, or when plan A didn't answer, and that hurts. But as Schopenhauer said, life swings between pain and boredom, and there you were, caught between both, trying to extract meaning from something that was pure selfishness, disguised as affection. Now the real question is, how many more times will you let her silence cost more than your peace? Because while you pretended it was love, she was merely exercising control. Cold, calculated, almost imperceptible. She looked at you with that rehearsed half-smile and said, with just the right sweetness, "You're so understanding." And you melted inside. It felt like praise, a reward for being different. You believed she saw something special in you, that maybe she was just afraid of feeling too much. That's why she couldn't commit. But Schopenhauer would warn, what looks like admiration can be nothing more than refined manipulation. She had found your blind spot, your need for validation through patience, and she used it like an invisible emotional leash. With every disappearance, every generic excuse, came the emotional reinforcement. That's why I like you. You understand me, and you believed it, without realizing you were being trained to tolerate the intolerable, to turn absence into affection, to call love something that was nothing but a well-packaged crumb. You weren't being praised for being strong. You were being rewarded for being inert, for not reacting, for not demanding, for staying exactly where she wanted you. Silent, submissive, and emotionally conditioned. She knew, as long as she gave you small doses of affection mixed with pretty words, you wouldn't leave. You confused empathy with submission. You called it maturity when in truth it was fear, fear of losing someone who was never really yours. You tolerated the emptiness, the coldness, the lack of commitment, thinking that's what a good partner does. But as Schopenhauer would say, the greatest illusion is to believe that someone else completes you. In reality, you were being shaped, and the more you accepted, the more she tested. Until one day, she didn't even make an effort anymore, because she already knew you'd still be there, available, waiting for something that would never come. You became the nice guy, the understanding one, the emotional anchor. And, over time, that image became your own prison, because, as Schopenhauer warned, the reward for our resignation is rarely gratitude, it is abuse. When someone realizes they can give you the bare minimum and still be praised, they'll never feel the need to give you what you truly deserve. And now, looking back, maybe you can finally see clearly. That compliment was never really about you. It was about the control she held. So the question is, how long will you keep applauding someone who trained you to accept so little? Do you remember the line that shattered you the most? The one she said with teary eyes or with an almost mystical calmness, "I'm just not ready for a relationship right now." And you, heart in hand, believed her. You thought it was about timing, about past wounds, about unhealed pain. You imagined that, with patience and love, she would eventually heal, and in the end, she'd choose you. So you waited. You respected her timing, offered support, and became more and more present, almost invisible in your own story. But Schopenhauer would understand. Human wanting is blind and irrational. She didn't need healing. She needed will. And that will painfully was never about you. The phrase, "I'm not ready," was selective, because when someone she truly wanted came along, she was ready, in record time. No excuses, no waiting. Shocking? Yes, but real. She wasn't emotionally unavailable. She was unavailable to you. To you it was not now. To him it was, "Come here, now." While you were holding the pieces, she was giving herself fully where her desire exploded. You were the advisor, the shoulder to cry on, the patch for a heart that wouldn't open for you, but beat fiercely for someone else. And even then you believed you were building something, but in truth you were just refueling her emotional tank with your unconditional affection. You became the emotional bank, the place she went to vent, complain about life, about the guys who didn't value her. And you, the good man, were always there and patient, sweet, waiting, but while you offered stability, she craved intensity. You were the safe harbor, but she preferred to sail stormy seas. You were too good to lose, but not good enough to be chosen. Cruel, without a doubt. But Schopenhauer would say, pain opens the eyes of reason, which desire had blinded. Now that you see things clearly, that phrase, "I'm not ready," takes on a whole new weight. She never meant not now. It was always not with you. And recognizing that changes everything, because you didn't make a mistake by loving, you made a mistake by waiting for someone who deep down had already made a choice. And that choice never included you. Schopenhauer said that illusion is the root of suffering, and you were deceived by half-truths, endless waiting, and the false romanticism of patience. But reality is raw. How long will you keep being the emotional? Pause for someone who only presses play with someone else? She never gave you a clear yes, but she also never had the courage to give you a definitive no, because she knew, to keep you close, all she had to do was feed your hope. Maybe someday. You're different. I just need time. And you believed. You renewed your faith like someone praying for a miracle. Meanwhile, she flirted, went out, lived new stories, but always kept you as her emotional backup. You weren't love, you were insurance. The certainty that someone would still be there in case everything else went wrong. You didn't see how calculated it all was. Every time you hinted at walking away, she sent a sweet voice note, a silly memory, "I miss you." And that was enough. Like a candle lit in the dark, giving you hope, only to burn out again soon after. And so you stayed stuck. She didn't need to invest in you, just make sure you didn't leave, because you were plan B. And as Schopenhauer said, humans would rather suffer than let go of hope. While you believed it was just a phase, she was making plans with someone else. While you waited for the right moment, she was living intense nights with someone who didn't need to wait for anything, but she made sure to keep you deluded, because your presence was useful. You were the shoulder to cry on, the advisor, the emotional comfort between one romance and the next. You were her emotional comfort zone, someone she used to recharge, but never to stay with. And the more you gave, the more she took. Without ever offering anything real in return, you clung to the illusion that all she needed was time. But time passed, and she only drifted further. As Schopenhauer would put it, suffering is born from unfulfilled desire, and you longed for her to choose you. But the truth is simple and brutal. Those who truly want don't postpone. Those who feel don't stall. Those who choose don't keep others on standby. Now that the blindfold has fallen, the question is inevitable. Will you keep living off empty promises? Or will you finally free yourself from the role of supporting character in a story you wanted to star in? You were the shoulder she cried on, the silence that listened without judgment, the constant presence in the days she said she didn't know what to do with her life. And you thought that meant something, that this emotional intimacy was a sign of something deeper, that being there in the hard times was proof of love, of a real bond, of connection. But it wasn't. It was convenience. Because while you carried her burdens, someone else made her forget those burdens even existed. You were the remedy. He was the addiction. You were the shelter when everything collapsed. But you weren't the one she wanted to celebrate victories with. When she needed comfort, it was you. But when she craved adrenaline, passion, emotion, it was someone else. You were the emotional refuge between storms she herself created. And still, you believed she just needed more time, more space, more healing. You ignored what Schopenhauer had already warned. What we call hope is often just a refined form of self-deception. To her, you were just the support, the emotional fuel station before heading back to the battlefield, where her heart truly wanted to be. She knew you wouldn't explode, wouldn't demand, wouldn't leave, and that turned you into her comfort zone. She dumped her sorrows, frustrations, and fears on you and walked away feeling lighter. And you? You stayed behind, carrying it all, thinking you were essential. But the truth is, you were being used, because when she smiled, when she posted, that mysterious photo with an ambiguous caption, when she vanished for the weekend, it wasn't with you she shared those moments. It was with him. And you didn't even realize you were the safe harbor. but she was addicted to the storm. And that hurt, because you believed stability was what she needed. But what she was really chasing was the opposite. The chaos the other guy offered felt more alive, more urgent, more intense. Meanwhile, you settled for being the shelter of someone who never intended to stay. Schopenhauer said, "Desire is the root of all suffering." And maybe her desire was never for peace, but for intensity. Now it's time to face it. How long will you be the temporary home for someone who only comes to you when the world outside collapses? The answer never came. Only that well-known, "I'll think about it," which almost sounded sincere, as if she were really considering you as a genuine option. And you took that halfway reply as progress, as if it were better than a no. But it was merely the most convenient way to keep every path open, without closing any. While you believed she just needed time, the truth is that she had already decided. You were not the priority. You were merely the emotional backup she didn't want to lose. "I'll think about it" worked as the perfect shield. It kept you stuck with no commitment at all, and the more effort you poured in, the harder. You tried to prove your worth, as if by showcasing everything you had to offer, you would finally become her choice. Yet she had already sifted the options. You were too safe, too predictable, too available, and precisely for that reason, you were never chosen. Because, as Schopenhauer sharply observed, man oscillates between pain and boredom, and you embodied the safety she confused with monotony. The other man made her blood boil, and that was enough. You didn't see it, or perhaps you didn't want to. And so the penny never dropped. She kept you on standby, as if her life were full of uncertainties. Yet strangely enough, for everything she truly wanted, she moved with astonishing speed. She accepted invitations within minutes, set up dates without thinking, made decisions with eyes sparkling. Only with you was it different. Only with you was there hesitation, because you were Plan B. And as long as Plan A was still alive, she would never let you level up. You were far too useful where you stood, available, reliable, easy to guide. The truth is that "I'll think about it" was never a promise. It was a leash, control disguised as hope. And now that you can see that, you have to decide. Will you keep accepting crumbs dressed up as possibilities? Or will you get up and walk out of the display shelf where she parked you, not out of love, but out of convenience? Schopenhauer already wrote that the less a man needs others, the closer he is to freedom. Perhaps that's the freedom you need now. To break free from the emotional dependence on someone who kept you close so she wouldn't lose you, yet never truly intended to have you. You spent a long time believing she was confused, wounded, lost, that she simply didn't know what she wanted. So you offered your best: patience, tolerance, understanding. You thought that if you gave her enough time, she would sort herself out, and you would finally get the place you always dreamed of. But the reality is far less romantic. She was never lost. She simply knew you were too safe to give up, while she spent her time with the one who truly stirred desire, adrenaline, obsession. She wasn't undecided. She was strategic, and you were predictable enough for her to set up the whole game with you in the palm of her hand. Every gesture of hers was calculated. The silence was a method of control. Sweet words always came right after your attempts to walk away, like carefully placed bait to keep you there. And you fell for it, because you believed love meant persistence. But what you didn't see was that she was measuring your reactions like someone testing the behavior of a pawn. When she saw you were still steady, hopeful, loyal, willing, she relaxed. She knew she still had control. You were loyal to the game without even knowing the rules. Without realizing you had already lost before you even started playing, she never stumbled over her emotions. Every step was a cold, calculated move. She would kiss you, then disappear for days. Share secrets to build a false sense of connection, yet keep you out of the real decisions. She made you feel special, but always just shy of the finish line. And you, fooled by the almost, kept playing your predictable role in a story that was never going to give you the ending you dreamed of. She ruled the board, because deep down, she knew. As long as you believed all she needed was time, she could do anything, and you would still be there waiting. Now that you see things clearly, it's time to break free from the illusion. She never played from doubt. She played from power. And you were the easiest piece to move. But that kind of control only works as long as the other stays blind. Now that the curtain has dropped, now that you've seen the machinery, will you keep being a manipulated piece, or will you flip the board and walk away from a game that was never yours? Schopenhauer wrote, "Fate shuffles the cards, but we play the hand." And maybe now is the moment to stop accepting someone else's game as if it were your own. Then suddenly, silence. No messages, no explanation, no sign of consideration. You reread the conversations, looked for flaws, tried to figure out where you went wrong. But there was no mistake on your end. There was a choice. She disappeared as if you were disposable, and in the cold logic of her world you were. Because that silence you took as a crisis, a moment of confusion, was actually relief. It was a decision. It was the yes someone else had given. While you were drowning in doubt, she was smiling somewhere else. While you were thinking about how to support her from a distance, she was already in the arms of the one she truly wanted. Her choice was clear, fast, unhesitating, and you were left frozen in the middle of the scene, trying to make sense of a script that was never written for you. She never thought about giving you a proper ending because to her you weren't a story, you were just an intermission. You weren't the destination. You were the detour until the main road opened, and what hurt deep down wasn't the end itself. It was the void, the complete lack of closure. No thank you, no goodbye, no door gently closing behind her. Because she didn't feel the same weight you were feeling, and she was calculation. You were devotion. She was strategy. You came up with theories to explain her absence. Imagined illness, family problems, emotional crises. You tried to understand her even in her abandonment. But the truth is more brutal than any theory. She simply moved on as if you had never existed. Schopenhauer believed that much of human suffering is born from attachment to illusion. And that's what you need to release now. The illusion that it was mutual. The illusion that you just needed to wait a little longer. The illusion that what you had was love. And now comes the most brutal shock. If she had chosen you, she'd be there. Because when someone truly wants something, they act. When someone really feels, they don't hide, they move closer. The disappearance wasn't a lapse. It was liberation. She vanished because she got what she wanted. And while you tried to piece together the fragments of your emotional puzzle, she was already starting a new game with someone who, to her, was always the prize. You were already starting to rise again, still wounded but moving forward, trying to turn absence into learning. And then, like a ghost that knows exactly where to haunt, a notification. I thought of you. Your heart raced. You thought it was redemption, that finally she had recognized the value you always carried. But what you didn't want to see, and now must face, is that she didn't come back for love. She came back out of need. Plan A failed. The castle she built in someone else's heart collapsed. And in her rush not to be alone, she turned to the safest emotional address she knew. You were always there, steady, available, waiting, and she knew it. You were the last resort, the number saved for ego emergencies. It wasn't real longing, it was desperation, it wasn't love, it was fear of being alone. And you, still carrying the bitter taste of hope, opened the door. You believed in the longing, you believed the words, but words are easy. And in the theater of neediness, she always knew how to act. Schopenhauer wrote, "Compassion is the basis of morality, but when directed at the manipulator, it becomes self-sabotage." And that's exactly it. You weren't being kind, you were aiding your own pain. Every time you accepted crumbs, every time you allowed yourself to be the backup plan, every time you fooled yourself with returns that felt more like relapses, you betrayed yourself. And her? She knew. She knew that a few rehearsed lines would open your soul again, the cruelest part. She was convincing. She said she missed you, that she realized how essential you were. And you believed it, not because it was true, but because it was everything you always wanted to hear. But now, with your eyes finally open, it's time to see. This was never love. It was convenience, it was refuge, it was use. And once her life stabilizes, she'll disappear again. because to her you were never the destination. You were just the shelter between two shipwrecks, and now that you know, the choice is yours. Will you keep being the safe harbor where she hides when her world collapses? Or will you close the door and finally let self-love walk in? Because there comes a time when awareness hurts more than longing, and that's exactly where healing begins. You no longer need to beg for reciprocity, nor settle for crumbs disguised as affection. The love you gave was whole, and it should have never been poured into someone who only ever wanted half. She was never a mystery. She was a clear choice, one that never chose you, and now you can choose too. You can choose to walk away from the waiting. You can choose to abandon the role of emotional savior that was never yours. You can finally choose yourself, with the same intensity you once gave to someone who only used you as a ladder. Schopenhauer said, "What makes people manipulable is the desire to be loved by those who don't know how to love." And you spent too long trying to prove your worth to someone who never had the ability or the will or to see it. But that ends today. Close the door, not out of pride, but out of respect. Not out of anger, but out of maturity. Close the door not so she'll come back, but so you never lose yourself again trying to fit into a place that never had room for you, because someone who truly loves doesn't turn presence into strategy. And someone who truly loves themselves doesn't accept being plan B in anyone's story. The question now isn't whether she'll come back. The question is, will you still be there, or will you already be gone? And now, with the silence screaming, louder than any word, there's only one thing left to do. Accept that closure doesn't always come from the other person. Sometimes you have to create it, with clarity and courage, because realizing it was all calculated hurts. But staying trapped in a manipulative absence, that's what truly destroys you. Enough. You no longer have to beg for explanations. That will never come, nor keep trying to heal a wound only she could have avoided, but chose to cause. Someone who blocks to escape has already proven they never had the maturity to build anything real. And you don't deserve to live at the mercy of someone who treats feelings as if they were disposable. The greatest answer you needed has already come. Her silence. And now, your freedom no longer depends on a hello. It begins with a no. Morna, close this cycle with truth in your hands and your head held high. Because anyone who disappears without explanation leaves behind the perfect space for you to rediscover yourself. And those who block to avoid hearing you reveal they never deserved the privilege of being heard. You tried, in every possible way. Now it's time to try for yourself. And finally, leave the place where you were never truly welcomed, not as a whole person. At the start, everything felt special. The glances, the sweet words, the subtle gestures that made you believe something real was blooming. You thought it was love, because you wanted it to be. But now looking back with each piece clicking into the puzzle of pain, the truth is brutal. It wasn't love. It was emotional manipulation, with a pre-written script, a game that was already in motion before you ever entered the scene. And you, without realizing, followed the script exactly as she planned. She never hesitated. She knew exactly when to appear, when to vanish, when to praise you, and when to go silent. Every move was calculated to keep you hooked, waiting, hoping. While you improvised with your heart, she performed with cold precision. And the cruelest part? You still looked for reasons, still wondered if you'd done something wrong, but now you see, she never made a mistake. You did, by believing. You were special when in truth you were only ever useful. Awakening doesn't come with answers. It comes with the collapse of the illusion, with that moment of clarity when you finally see the pattern. And it hurts, because you realize you were deceived, not with words, but with absence. The real blow was making you wait for something that never even existed. Love was the bait, attachment, the emotional prison. And now the only thing that sets you free. Here's the raw, dry, and violent truth. And as much as it hurts to see it, that's the only way you truly heal. If this video spoke for you, or for that part of you that still hadn't found its voice, subscribe to the channel now. Here, you won't find illusions. You'll find clarity, you'll find strength to finally break the cycle. Because as long as you stay asleep, someone else keeps writing your ending. Don't allow it. Wake up, fight back, and write your own story. with clarity, self-respect, and love for yourself.